मालती मालिकानिभः मौनी मानसहंसोऽयं मौढ्यं हरतु नः शिवः. A very good evening to you all. On behalf of Gokhale Institute of Public Affairs and on my own behalf, I most cordially invite you all for the 4th Dr. S. Ramaswami Memorial Lecture to be delivered today by Professor C. Naganna, who has come all the way from Mysore just to deliver this lecture. We are grateful to you, sir. To start with, a very brief note on Dr. S. Ramaswamy I am presenting here. He obtained his MA First Class in English Literature and received gold medal from Mysore University in 1954. He was a Fulbright Smithman Scholar at the University of California at Los Angeles from 1964 to 1966 and earned an MA in American Literature and won the Phi Beta Kappa Award. He was awarded a PhD degree for his thesis on Tennessee Williams by Bengaluru University in 1973. He was a British Council Scholar at Oxford and London, a Senior Fulbright Fellow at California, Texas and Yale, and a Shastri Indo-Canadian Scholar at McGill University, Montreal. He has been widely published in the areas of American literature, comparative literature, and Indological studies. He had studied Sanskrit traditionally and was a Fellow of Silliman College, Yale University. His Kannada translation of S.L. Bhairappa's Sartha has been published from Oxford University Press. His other translations are Mandra, Tantu, Bhitti of S.L. Bhairappa into English, D.V.J.'s Samskruti, C.K. Venkatramaya's Ubhaya Bharati, V.C.'s Pampa Yatre, and S.K. Ramchandra Rao's Geete Gondu Kaipedi. He was the editor of Tatvaloka, a spiritual quarterly journal of Sringeri Shankarmat. He was a founder member of Bangalore Little Theatre and was its founder secretary between 1960 and 1964. In that capacity, he had worked in all aspects of theatre like acting, directing, etc. He had acted in plays by Shakespeare, Molière, Chekhov, John Osborne, and Thornton Wilder, and had lectured extensively on various Indian universities and abroad. He had studied Shakespeare at Stratford-upon-Avon under the director Philip Brockbank and had made a special study of London theatre. Based on his extensive lecture tours to England, Canada, Mexico, France, Germany, Switzerland, Italy, Holland, Belgium, Denmark, Sweden, Japan, Hong Kong, Thailand, Malaysia, and Singapore, he wrote his travelogue in Kannada, Alemaria Aledata, which got him Karnataka Sahitya Academy Award. He had written 40 books in English and Kannada and 300 research papers, and had guided dozen research scholars for their doctoral degrees. Students fondly used to address him as Shakespeare Ramaswamy, as his initials were SR. Diligent poets like Nisar Ahmad, Sumitendra Nadig, playwrights like H.S. Shivprakash, P. Lankesh, J.K. Govindrao, B.V. Rajanam, jurists like Santosh Hegde, Malimat, Sadashiva, educationists like M.R. Doraswamy, K.E. Radhakrishna, politicians like Ramchandra Gowda, Raghupati, sports wizards like Arvind Savur, Usha Sundarraj, actors like H.G. Somshekhar Rao, Lohit Ashwa, Girish Kasarvalli, literary luminaries like Purusha Saraswati, Shatavdani R. Ganesh, and Gnana Chakravarti V. Satyanarayana were some of his illustrious students. Now I come to the revered speaker of this evening, Professor C. Naganna. Probably one may try to introduce, because he cannot be introduced fully, I know that. Try to introduce Professor Naganna in the following lines of Shakespeare. What a piece of work is man! How noble in reason, how infinite in faculty, in form and moving, how express and admirable, in action, how like an angel, in appreciation, how like a god. Just as Mysore Mallige, Mysore silk, Mysore sandal soap, Mysore Badnekai, Mysore Hiryanna, Mysore Dasara, Mysore Viledele, needs no introduction. Naganna, who hails from Mysore, needs no introduction. My plight in introducing Professor Naganna would be like to see a world in a grain of sand, heaven in a wildflower, to hold infinity in an hour and eternity in the palm of the hands. Naganna is like a Triveni Sangam of Srirangpatna, as he is a unique blend of diligent poet, dexterous critic, and an unsurpassed translator. As an author, he has published more than 50 books in Kannada and English and has edited several seminal works of international repute. Mention must be made to his monograph on Krishna Alanhalli, published from Sahitya Academy, a monograph on Professor C.N. Ramchandran, published from Navakarnataka, and his editing of the work Methodology in Translating Pre-Modern Texts, published from Sahitya Academy, and his Kannada translation of Achibe's Things Fall Apart into Kannada, and his critical essays Pariprekshya, published from Prasaranga, Karnataka Open University, which he had inscribed to my father on 9/9/2012. He was a professor of comparative literature and translation studies at the University of Mysore and is currently a visiting professor at the same university. He was also the director of publication division of the university, namely Prasaranga. This Gandaberunda is equally at home in administration as well as academics, and he was a member of Kannada Advisory Committee of Bharatiya Gnanpith Awards, Saraswati Samman, Central Sahitya Academy, and was also a member of Karnataka Sahitya Academy. Numerous organizations have vied with one another in honoring Professor Naganna in recognition of his contribution to the fields of language and culture. Though he has not gone in search of awards, awards have come in search of him, as Kalidasa would say, na ratnam anvishyati mrugyate hi tat. The crowning glory of all the awards is the Karnataka Rajyotsava Award bestowed on him on 1st of November 2023, that is last year, at Ravindra Kalakshetra, Bengaluru. Professor Naganna has not touched anything which has not adorned him. Let me conclude my introduction to Professor Naganna by reading an extract from Star of Mysore, November 26, 2013. Professor Naganna should have been conferred with the Rajyotsava Award years ago. Chamarajnagar MLA Srinivas Prasad. Over to Professor Naganna, who has readily agreed to deliver the 4th memorial lecture of my father in spite of his very, very busy schedule. Before he delivers his lecture, I have the pleasure of honoring him on this auspicious occasion, and I should have honored him as soon as he got Rajyotsava Award, but I could not do so. Therefore, I take this opportunity today to honor him on behalf of Gokhale Institute of Public Affairs and on behalf of all of you today.
ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. ಮೊದಲಿಗೆ ಈ ಉಪನ್ಯಾಸವನ್ನು ಏರ್ಪಡಿಸಿರುವ ನಾಡಿನ ಘನ ವಿದ್ವಾಂಸರಾದ ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ ರಂಗನಾಥ್ ಅವರಿಗೆ ನನ್ನ ಹೃತ್ಪೂರ್ವಕವಾದ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರಗಳು. ಈಗಾಗಲೇ ಅವರು ತಮಗೆ ನನ್ನನ್ನು ಪರಿಚಯ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಹೃದಯ ತುಂಬಿ ನಾನು ತುಂಬ ವಿನಮ್ರನಾಗಿ ಆಗುವಂತೆ ಅವರು ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅವರ ಪರಿಚಯ ಭಾಷಣದಿಂದ ಈ ಉಪನ್ಯಾಸದ ಸಂಬಂಧವಾಗಿ ಬಹಳ ಸಹಕರಿಸಿದ ಸಂಸ್ಥೆಯ ಗೌರವ ಕಾರ್ಯದರ್ಶಿಗಳಾದ ಮಾನ್ಯ ಶ್ರೀ ನಾಗರಾಜ್ ಅವರಿಗೆ ಹಾಗೂ ಶ್ರೀ ರಾಮು ಅವರಿಗೆ ನಾನು ಕೃತಜ್ಞನಾಗಿದ್ದೀನಿ. This particular lecture was originally scheduled on 26th of March 2024. Owing to some unavoidable circumstances, I was unable to make it, and I requested Professor Ranganath to accommodate me sometime later. I am acutely aware how difficult it must have been to reschedule the program. Professor Ranganath kindly reduced my guilt by assuring me that absolutely there is no problem, you can deliver the talk sometime in April or May, he said. Once again, I thank him and the secretary for this magnanimity. It's a cruel coincidence that today is IPL cricket finals, and most of us, if not all of us, are cricket enthusiasts, and I hope you will not curse me for making you come out of your cozy homes missing some portion of the first innings. Kindly bear with me. This lecture or talk is held in memory of the redoubtable scholar, teacher, Professor S. Ramaswami, and Srimati Kalavati, the dear parents of Professor Ranganath. When Professor Ranganath gave me the topic 6 months before March 26th, I think, I gladly agreed to deliver the talk, not because I am a Shakespearean scholar, but because I got an opportunity to pay my humble tributes to one of the finest English teachers who was equally at home in Sanskrit, Kannada, French, and many other probably European languages. He was a polyglot in the real sense of the term. With no hesitation, I would describe Dr. Ramaswami as my teacher, because I have learned many things from him by participating in seminars and conferences held at the University of Mysore, especially at Dhonyaloka Research Center, Mysore, where he was a permanent fixture. Professor C.D. Narasimharaja, my revered teacher, always made it a point to invite Dr. Ramaswami and also Professor Ranganath to many, many seminars and symposia, as CDN knew that Professor Ramaswami would enliven conferences with his enviable erudition and enlighten the fellow scholars and audiences with his characteristic wit and wisdom. That is why I said Professor Ramaswami was my teacher, though I was not fortunate to be his classroom student. The moment Professor Ranganath invoked the name of Shakespeare, my mind went back to Dr. Ramaswami's seminar papers on Shakespeare in particular, and the Indian and European theatre in general. Professor Ramaswami's contribution for the Bengaluru literary theatre's development is quite well known, and he would recall the roles he played under the aegis of BLT. He would humorously recall his role as a witch in the play Macbeth. Particularly, he was fond of the pun when somebody asked him, "Which witch did you play in Macbeth?" He was very fond of this particular pun, "Which witch you played in Macbeth?" Professor Ramaswami would regale the audiences by recalling such enduring anecdotes, which were generously interspersed with his scholarly disquisitions, which invariably enriched us a great deal. Another astonishing aspect of Professor Ramaswami's personality was that he always had a good word for our seminar papers, our in the sense people belonging to the younger generation. He would always pat us on our back and say, "Excellent, well done, keep it up." That was And this particular encouragement would egg us on to present more and more papers. So we owe him a debt of gratitude for playing the role of a mentor in a very subtle and unobtrusive way. Professor Ramaswami is fortunate in yet another aspect, and that is he has given us Sri Ranganath, who perhaps has excelled his father in very many ways. I can go on and on in this fashion, remembering Professor S. Ramaswamy, but he would smile from his heavenly abode with his non-verbal reprimand, "Gentlemen, have you forgotten this evening's assignment coming all the way from Mysore?" My silent reply would be, "Sir, I will not do any disservice to your memory." With this sketchy background, I will take up my topic, William Shakespeare, with a particular reference to the play Hamlet. All of you have studied at least a couple of plays of Shakespeare, if not all, during your undergraduate days. If you were lucky, you would have had the advantage of good drama teachers like Professor Ramaswamy, who knew their Shakespeare thoroughly and enlightened you on several aspects of the Shakespearean drama. As far as I am concerned, I must say that I was not fortunate enough to get good teachers who taught Shakespeare adequately. They might have taught me English literature in general, but one should be really lucky to get extraordinary Shakespearean scholars and teachers. Sheer love of Shakespeare drew me to more and more of his plays, and that is part of my preparation and study. I'm also sure that one lifetime is not enough to master Shakespeare, though we may read his complete works. Shakespeare's was a half a life because he lived only for 52 years. In our tradition, the elders always bless the juniors to live for 100 years. In that sense, Shakespeare lived for only 52 years, therefore it is considered to be half a life. The amount of criticism written on his plays is so enormous that we cannot possibly read and exhaust all the works. It is customary to describe the quantum of criticism by an analogy. That is, if you place the pages one after another, as far as criticism is concerned, Shakespearean criticism, probably it would reach the clouds. That is the sheer magnitude of Shakespearean criticism. It is very, very daunting and unnerving to think about criticism per se. So we have all heard of Shakespeare industry and the imperishable empire he has built, and we stand before the tower of Shakespeare criticism and salute him in reverence. To begin with, let me brush up your memory a bit about Shakespeare's biographical background and a quick run-through of the chronology of his plays. Shakespeare was born on 23rd of April 1564 at Stratford-upon-Avon. His mother, Mary Arden, descended from nobility, and his father, John Shakespeare, was a prosperous businessman of the village, Stratford-upon-Avon. John and Mary gave birth to 8 children, 4 sons and 4 daughters. William, the third child and first son, was christened on 26th April 1564. Shakespeare married Anne Hathaway in November 1582. She was several years older than him. Actually, Shakespeare was just an 18-year-old boy when he married her. Probably she was 8 years old, older than him. Susanna was the first child, born in May 1583. In February 1585, twins were born, namely Hamlet the son and Judith the daughter. These were the 3 children Shakespeare gave birth to. Some historians say that Shakespeare was an ignorant youth and was driven from his careless rustic existence to a very different career in London. The same historians tell us that Shakespeare began rewriting the plays of others, among them those of Robert Greene, his contemporary Robert Greene. So how did he happen to rewrite the plays of his own contemporaries. This is really a kind of transformation from a rustic of Stratford to a literary figure of London, and this has been left unexplained, and it looks highly improbable on its face value. Anyway, Green is supposed to have made this remark when Shakespeare appeared on the horizon in the city of London, and it is attributed to Green, who said, Shakespeare, here is an upstart crow. A crow has come from a village, and this is an upstart crow. Robert Greene said, it seems. Greene and many others were university products. For example, Robert Greene studied in both Oxford and Cambridge University, and why his works were turned over to an illiterate newcomer is hardly comprehensible. Shakespeare probably arrived in London in 1584. He was just a 20-year-old young man, though no certain date can be given of his arrival. But by 1594, he had to his credit the quantum of work which could only have been possible through a considerable number of years. So Shakespeare was already highly thought of, and this was strengthened by his publication of Venus and Adone, the long poem, in the year 1593, and another long poem, Rape of Lucrece, in the next year, that is 1594. It is now established with considerable proof that Shakespeare started his career as a dramatist a few years earlier than 1590. According to an approximate order of their composition, his works are divided into 5 segments. 1584-1592, first segment. 1592-1594, 2-year period, that is second segment. 1594-1599, third. 1599-1608, fourth. And 1608 and 1613, the fifth segment. In the first segment, we have Comedy of Errors, Taming of the Shrew, Two Gentlemen of Verona. In the second segment, of course, we have just one play, Love's Labour's Lost. In the third, Midsummer Night's Dream, The Merchant of Venice, Merry Wives of Windsor, Much Ado About Nothing, As You Like It. In the next one, we have Twelfth Night, Troilus and Cressida, Measure for Measure, All Is Well That Ends Well. In the fifth and the last segment, we have Pericles, Cymbeline, The Winter's Tale, and The Tempest. So, with Julius Caesar in 601, followed by Antony and Cleopatra and Coriolanus, Shakespeare turned to Roman history, borrowing his sources from Plutarch. 1602 is the period of the great tragedies, Hamlet, Othello, and Macbeth, and the dark comedies, Measure for Measure and Troilus and Cressida. The tragedies are undoubtedly Shakespeare's greatest plays, you would agree. Hamlet, the play, excels in the intellectual character of the hero and the modern nature of the problems which make the play tragic. Sometimes I refer to Hamlet the character, and sometimes I refer to Hamlet the play. Kindly note this. Macbeth the character is an antithesis of Hamlet, the tragedy evolving out of the hero's all-encompassing ambition. In fact, to describe Macbeth, we use the adjective vaulting ambition. That is Macbeth's, say, a particular character, ambition. And in that sense, he is an exact antithesis of Hamlet, who procrastinates, puts off things until a later day. Othello, another great tragedy of Shakespeare, grips the heart and holds it due to the marvelous plot web, leaving the reader limp and exhausted in the end. King Lear is the tragedy of barbaric age and of filial emotional displacement. Shakespeare perhaps was at the height of his dramatic ability in King Lear, blending his language and meter to heighten the dramatic effect. So the small group of his last plays, namely Pericles, Cymbeline, The Winter's Tale, and The Tempest, highlight the importance of forgiveness and reconciliation. Whether these plays in part explain the poet's approaching retirement to Stratford or not, because that is what some critics believe, that by the time he reached that half a life, the last segment of his career, he wanted to retire from his engagements to a peaceful, calmer and serener outlook to life is very much an extension of the Shakespeare magic. Remember in the play Tempest, Prospero, who is supposed to represent Shakespeare himself, breaks the magic wand as if he is retiring and bidding goodbye to all his literary preoccupations. Symbolically, he is breaking the magic wand, as it were. So, as Ben Jonson, his junior contemporary, rightly said, Shakespeare was not of an age, but for all times. Not of an age, but for all times. In fact, we customarily say Shakespeare is for all times and all climes, because his characters are true to the eternal aspect of human life and not limited to any contemporary society. That's the reason why we say Shakespeare for all times and all climes. Edward Dowden, the 19th century critic, one of the very, very distinguished Shakespearean critics, has divided the plays into 4 parts. In the Workshop, that's the title of the first part. In the World, second part. Out of Deaths, third part. On the Heights, fourth part. So the 4 stages do loosely depict Shakespeare's dramatic progress as much as they depict the natural course of a pilgrim's progress, so to say. Yet we can say that he stood aloof as he shaped his creative work with serenity and humanism, understanding all, sympathizing with all, but always in control, always a master of everything he did. So Samuel Taylor Coleridge, the great English poet and also a great Shakespearean critic, was wrong when he labeled Hamlet as the perplexed and brooding Shakespeare and Prospero as the calm and royal Shakespeare. So that is the difficulty. We cannot attribute the characters' contours to Shakespeare himself, because Shakespeare was too myriad in his sensibilities to be limited to any one of his characters. So that is the reason why we cannot take Prospero as representing Shakespeare and so on and so forth. So a man torn by the problems of evil, the injustice of the universal laws, the betrayal of innocence, the triumph of the wicked, may write burning verse, the lyrics of a Shelley, the epic satire of a Byron, but the Shakespearean tragedies could not be written by a suffering or saddened spirit. I say this because we are all familiar with P.B. Shelley's Prometheus Unbound, the play Prometheus Unbound. In fact, Shelley was very much inspired by the great Greek tragedian Aeschylus, who wrote Prometheus Bound 2500 years ago, but Shelley could not measure up to the Greek master in encompassing the tragic elements in his play Prometheus Unbound. So they may have tried the tragic elements, they may have tried to introduce tragic elements, but the 19th century poets come playwrights like Shelley could not rise up to that level. So to touch the depth of moral philosophy like Shakespeare, it was absolutely impossible, and probing the mystery with unrivaled intensity is a specialty of Shakespeare, and nobody can replicate it in their creative works. So that's the reason why we say Shakespeare excelled in the perfect naturalness of the dialogue. This sketchy introduction is just an attempt to classify Shakespeare's work, if such a thing is possible to such an emancipated soul. Permit me to brush up your memory of the play Hamlet. King Hamlet, King of Denmark, dies, leaving his wife Gertrude a widow. He also leaves a son, Hamlet. The king's death is caused by Claudius, the prince's uncle. He poured poison into the ears of the king while he slept in the garden one afternoon. Gertrude marries Claudius within a month after her husband's death. Claudius also manages to become the king of Denmark. The marriage has a distinct quality of insensitivity. Claudius is the complete antithesis of the magnificent king that is Hamlet's father. Prince Hamlet, the heir apparent to the throne of Denmark, was studying at the University of Wittenberg at the time of his father's death. He idolized his father and is totally distraught when he is summoned home on the death of his father. He has an acute sense of honor and is profoundly hurt at the undignified haste with which his mother married Claudius, devoid of any grief for her departed husband. The prince loses his happiness and a dense gloom descends upon him. He wonders as to how a woman could behave like that towards a loving, gentle, and upright husband. Gertrude and Claudius try in vain to divert the prince's sorrow. Hamlet suspects that his uncle has murdered the king to usurp the throne. His mother's role in helping his uncle to murder his father also haunts him continuously. Amidst all this turmoil, Hamlet is informed that an apparition resembling the dead king is seen by the soldiers standing watch at midnight. The apparition was also seen by Horatio, Hamlet's bosom friend. One night, Hamlet also stands watch with Horatio and Marcellus, one of the guards. The ghost appears and solemnly exhorts him to avenge his death. The ghost is sad that Gertrude should so fall from grace and prove false towards their marital love. The ghost, however, cautions Hamlet to be kind to his mother and leave her to the pangs of guilt. Hamlet swears to the ghost that he would avenge his father's death, especially when the ghost tells him that Claudius had put poison in his ear. This news takes Hamlet to the fringes of insanity. He decides to use his disheveled mind to feign madness in order to avoid any suspicion. He adorns a wild and bizarre set of clothes. His speech and his behavior is equally bizarre. Unable to find the reason for his weird conduct, the king and the queen think that his malady is due to love. Hamlet had been clearly in love with Ophelia, the daughter of Polonius, the king's chief counselor in the affairs of the state. But Hamlet's sorrow is all-consuming that he neglects her and in fact is rude and unkind towards Ophelia. The kind and gentle Ophelia thinks that he is rude because of his insanity. Hamlet's insanity, however, lies in his father's death. Every hour that he lives appears to him as a sin and violation of his father's order. The thought of killing another human being is so very hateful to his gentle disposition. While Hamlet is still resolving his mind, certain players come to the court and with their assistance, he stages a play called The Murder of Gonzago, in which the Duke, that is Gonzago's close relative called Lucianus, poisons the Duke and later wins the love of his wife. So Hamlet closely watches his mother and the king. Claudius is so profoundly guilt-stricken when the scene is enacted that he is unable to sit through the play. he leaves abruptly, pretending sickness. Hamlet is convinced that the ghost himself was his father and that Claudius had in fact murdered him. He swears to his friend Horatio that he would seek revenge. Just then he is called by his mother for a conversation in her private chamber. This particular scene is called closet scene in the play. Different sequences are remembered by what happens, and this is the closet scene, the meeting of Queen and her son Hamlet. The Queen makes a vain attempt to convince Hamlet about her remarriage. She even calls Claudius as Hamlet's father, which angers him considerably. He holds her hand rather harshly, and the Queen is afraid that he may harm her in his insanity. Therefore she cries out for help. Just then a voice too shouts from behind the curtains for Queen's help. Hamlet draws out his sword and stabs in the direction from which the voice came. When Hamlet pulls out the body from behind the curtains, he realizes that he has killed Polonius. The Queen is horrified and rebukes her son at his bloody deed. The prince instead reminds her of the wickedness of her own crime. Just then, the ghost of her father appears and reminds him of his promised revenge. The Queen does not see the ghost, and she is very scared on seeing Hamlet talking to thin air. He tells her that her sins have brought his father's spirit back to this earth. He tells her also to confess her sins and no more be a wife to his uncle. Hamlet is left behind in tears at having killed Ophelia's father. Polonius' death gives the king an opportunity to banish Hamlet out of Denmark. He arranges to send him to England along with a letter to English court that Hamlet should be put to death as soon as he lands on English soil. Hamlet manages to get hold of the letter and replaces his name with courtiers who are accompanying him. The courtiers are Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. These are his own schoolfellows, classmates. So look at the tragedy. The moment the ship arrives in England, the courtiers are executed as per the contents of the letter. Now Hamlet returns to Denmark, and on his return home, he is confronted by the funeral of Ophelia, whom he loved dearly. The violent death of her dear father, Polonius, at the hands of the prince shattered her completely. In her insanity, she went about singing flowers to the ladies of the court, giving flowers to the ladies of the court, saying that they were meant for her father's burial, and singing songs of love and death simultaneously. One day she came upon a small brook, clambering up to hang a garland upon the branches of the tree. She slipped and fell into the brook and died. Hamlet finds Laertes, Ophelia's brother, performing her funeral rites with the king and the queen and the whole court in attendance. The distraught queen laments that she had wanted to bedeck Ophelia with bridal flowers and not funeral flowers. Hamlet leaps into Ophelia's grave, completely overcome with grief, and requests those present to drown him with cover him with mud so that he might be buried with her. That is the kind of intensity of his grief that he tells others, why don't you bury me along with Ophelia? So Laertes, Ophelia's brother, also leaps into the grave, catches Hamlet by the throat and tries to choke him, but is separated by the attendants. Hamlet says that he is sorry for his impudent act, but he cannot see that anyone should surpass his sorrow for Ophelia's death. This pacifies Laertes for the time being. So the wicked king sees this as an opportunity to plan Hamlet's destruction. He tells Laertes to change Hamlet to a friendly challenge Hamlet to a friendly bout of fencing, which Hamlet accepts. A day is set for the match to be undertaken in the presence of the whole court. The king tells Laertes to poison his weapon against all rules of fencing. Laertes lets Hamlet gain advantage at the beginning of the bout. The wicked king praises Hamlet and extols his virtue and wagers a bet on his victory. When Hamlet's defenses are slackened, Laertes makes a fatal thrust at Hamlet's body. He then asks the innocent Hamlet to exchange his weapon with him in order to shift the blame from himself. Because the sword he wields, Laertes wields, is poisoned. He has applied poison to the tip of the sword as guided by the wicked king. So Laertes, however, also gets a fatal blow from the same sword by Hamlet. That means both of them are going to die shortly. Just then the queen shrieks that she has been poisoned. What happened actually is, what has happened, she accidentally drinks out of the bowl full of poison prepared by the king for Hamlet in case Laertes were to fail. So the queen dies, and Hamlet, suspecting treachery, orders the doors of the chamber to be locked. As Laertes pants for his life, he confesses of his own treachery and tells Hamlet that he too does not have more than half an hour to live. That means both of them are going to die. So he begs Hamlet to pardon him and accuses the king for being the main culprit in the whole episode. So with his end perilously close, Hamlet turns towards the king and thrusts the poisonous sword into his heart, thus fulfilling the promise he had made to his father. Hamlet turns to his bosom friend Horatio, who too wants to kill himself, because after the death of Hamlet, Horatio says, I have no will to live. I don't want to outlive you. I will commit suicide. He says, but Hamlet requests him to live so that he can tell this story to the world after me. So don't kill yourself, because you have to tell the tragic story of Hamlet and all that to the whole world. Therefore, you must live, says Hamlet. So Horatio promises to do that to the best of his ability. Satisfied, Hamlet dies. Horatio and the courtiers, with tear-filled eyes, command the spirit of Hamlet to the guardianship of angels, for he would have been an exceptional king had he lived. That's what Horatio thinks. And this is the summary of the play. I think it was A.C. Bradley who established the efficacy of approaching the text through character analysis. Although many alternative approaches have come and gone, A.C. Bradley continues to be the benchmark. So I follow his method in understanding the significance of the analysis of the characters in the play. Let us consider some of them and find out how the play is designed around them. Hamlet first. Hamlet is essentially a tragic figure, as we have seen. We consider him a failure, not because the task laid upon him remains unfulfilled, but because he achieves it at an appalling and senseless cost. All that is amiable and excellent in human nature, for example, horror towards evil, deep filial piety, gentleness, generosity, all these are in him in abundance. Yet he lacks decisive action, which makes him a tragic hero. So the grand object of his life flops miserably because he resolves continually and then does nothing to fulfill his resolution. He is aware of his own weaknesses and constantly tries to reason himself out of it. The tragedy is that he does nothing beyond reason since his predominant emotion is thought and not action. It is true that Hamlet kills Polonius, that he kills Claudius, that he sends Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to their death, that he grapples with Laertes at Ophelia's grave. But all this is impulsive action, done under extreme pressure of momentary impulse of absolute necessity. Hamlet can act when he does not reflect. When he does, the deed is never done. His two main qualities are thinking and feeling. Harassed from without and distracted from within, Hamlet has no option but to conceal his thoughts from others. The pounding that his sensibilities take repeatedly throughout the play would have put any sane man on the fringes of insanity. In Hamlet, there is an immense gap between a sense of duty and its fulfillment, between willing and doing, between discernment and resolve, and between resolve and action. So obsessed is he with his internal world that he is somewhat of an alien to the outer world. Shakespeare shows us how our best qualities are still not a moral value if we fail to cultivate the active powers. So I turn my attention to his bosom friend, a philosopher in the play, namely Horatio. Horatio is admirably created as a foil to Hamlet. Hamlet pays a poignant tribute to him when he says that he is above all things a study of control, accepting good fortune and bad with equal calm. This is the tribute Hamlet pays to Horatio, that is equanimity personified. He is always serene and calm, etc., etc. He has many good qualities, that is Horatio, which are lacking in the hero of the play, that is Hamlet himself. So Horatio is a loyal friend and confidant on whom Hamlet can place implicit faith. He is sane and rational and is constantly endeavoring to bring the hypersensitive Hamlet to the world of reality from his world of confused emotions. He speaks sparingly and his words are brief and pragmatic. This is Horatio as contrasted from Hamlet. It is only with Horatio that Hamlet can relax and be lively. According to the critic Dowden, this friend and fellow scholar is the one sterling thing in the rotten state of Denmark. That is the phrase occurring in the play. I have come to the rotten state of Denmark. Hamlet, coming from the University of Wittenberg, after examining in the first instance itself the condition or the situation of Denmark, he says, I have come to the rotten state of Denmark. So Dowden, the critic, says, this friend Horatio, he is a fellow scholar, is the one sterling thing in the rotten state of Denmark. Horatio's equanimity, his evenness of temper, is like solid land to Hamlet after the tossings and tumult of his own heart. Yet all the while, this is where I think Dowden the critic comes to the fore. All the while, Shakespeare compels us to feel that it is Hamlet with his manifold weakness and misplaced judgment who is the rarer nature of the two, and that Horatio is made to be his helpmate, recognizing in service his highest duty. Now, to Gertrude, Hamlet's mother and the queen. Whenever we think of Gertrude, we think of incest and adultery. Shakespeare even devotes a complete soliloquy to this particular theme of incest and adultery as far as Gertrude is concerned. Hamlet's mind is filled with fumes of poison as he writhes in pain and longs for death as an escape. The interview with his father's spirit increases the burden on Hamlet's soul. Gertrude is not entirely bad-hearted. She loves to be happy like a sheep in the sun. She wants others happy too in a similar manner. She thought Hamlet was a fool to persist in grieving for his father instead of marrying Ophelia and making his life happy and comfortable. That is what she expects. Despite her flaws, she was not a privy to her husband's murder. Gertrude is a simple-hearted woman whose sole emotion is one of sensuality, which hides her good qualities. She is cheerful, robust, even caring, and yet all this hardly seem to matter when placed beside her incest and adultery. Now, Claudius. If Hamlet is pensive, sensitive, contemplative, and an idealist, Claudius is pragmatic, wily, decisive, and heartless. Hamlet has morality but cannot act. Claudius only knows how to act and lacks morality. Hamlet repents that he cannot do his deed. Claudius does the most horrible of things and does not have the slightest break of conscience. That is the difference between the two. There is no doubt that Claudius is the villain of the play. His only emotions are lust, misplaced ambition, and treachery. Claudius's character illustrates that primarily a man's sins would inevitably find out in the end. Claudius is profoundly wicked and he has bluffed existence, and it is very difficult to exonerate him of his crimes or to give him credit for his repentance. Because of paucity of time, I will resist the temptation of dwelling on Polonius, Ophelia, and Laertes, three other characters in the play who are an integral part of the design woven by the playwright. They figure very prominently in the subplot if Hamlet, Claudius, and Gertrude form the main plot. Before winding up, let me make some general remarks about the play and some characters. The play Hamlet has been variously described as a poetic puzzle, as a dramatic sphinx, and as the Mona Lisa of literature. There is an enigmatic atmosphere in the play, it's true, but we do well to respect it than to explain it away. Many commentators have turned towards psychology to understand the mystery. Coleridge, the great Shakespearean critic, said, "I have a smack of Hamlet myself, if I may say so." ನಮ್ಮೊಳಗೂ ಒಬ್ಬ ಹ್ಯಾಮ್ಲೆಟ್ ಇದ್ದಾನೆ ಅಂತ, ನಾನು ಒಬ್ಬ ಹ್ಯಾಮ್ಲೆಟ್ ಹಾಗೆ ನೋಡೋಕ್ಕೆ ಹೋದರೆ ಅಂತ ಕೋಲ್ರಿಡ್ಜ್ ಹೇಳ್ತಾನೆ. ಐ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಎ ಸ್ಮ್ಯಾಕ್ ಆಫ್ ಹ್ಯಾಮ್ಲೆಟ್ ಮೈ ಸೆಲ್ಫ್ ಇಫ್ ಐ ಮೇ ಸೇ ಸೊ, ಸೇಸ್ ಕೋಲ್ರಿಡ್ಜ್. The clear-sighted Hazlitt, William Hazlitt, his contemporary, formulated the principle when he remarked, "It is we who are Hamlet." This is Hazlitt. "It is we who are Hamlet," says Hazlitt. There are infinite variety of Hamlets. If you assume they have all been formed in that mirror of inspection, which Shakespeare holds up to every individual. Infinite variety of Hamlets. Hamlet means so many things to so many men because he invites them to put themselves in his place. The play begins with a question, who is there? That's the beginning of the first phrase uttered in the play by one of the characters. Who is there? It might be the cry of a frightened child in the dark. It might also be the query of a metaphysician scanning the void of evidence of God. That kind of metaphoric extension this phrase, who is there, contains. So, who is there? It might be the cry of a frightened child in the dark, or it might also be the query of a metaphysician scanning the void for evidence of God. Polonius is the chamberlain and he professes one and practices another. He is master of ceremonies and bustles about arranging formalities according to protocol, but he is also a master of intrigue who sneaks behind curtains to spy. And with him the play oscillates between ceremonious public hearings and furtive whisperings behind the scenes. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, with them the double dealing is systematically personified in the play. Since they hunt together, their roles are interchangeable. Hamlet's singleness and singularity is set off from duplication and conformity represented by his schoolfellows, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. Hamlet has a true friend in Horatio, who is impervious to fortune's buffets and rewards. He is a saintly character, so to say, in the play Hamlet. He is untouched by corruption, by vacillation. He does not vacillate. He is very sure. When the ghost appears, other characters say, "You are a philosopher, speak to it, Horatio. The ghost may speak to you," etc. So all the characters hold him in high esteem. Therefore, the critics say, Horatio is impervious to fortune's buffets and rewards. Hamlet is surrounded by inclement contingencies. For example, his father is dead, though through a suspected foul play. His mother has married under immoral circumstances. His uncle is culpable on these counts. Love between him and Ophelia is an excluded possibility. That's why I said Hamlet is surrounded by inclement contingencies. Ophelia too has been triply isolated. For example, she is cut off from her lover's affection, her brother's absence is there, and of course her father dies an accidental death. So there are 7 soliloquies in the play, and each soliloquy represents the turning point in the protagonist's career, and also it marks a new predicament. In Hamlet's view, death is the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns. The undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns. ಶಾಸನ ಬರೆದಂಗಿದೆ. ಸತ್ತವರು ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಹೋಗ್ತಾರೆ ಅಂದರೆ ಅವರು ನಮಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲದ ಯಾವುದೋ ಒಂದು ದೇಶಕ್ಕೆ ಹೊರಟೋಗ್ತಾರೆ, ಅಲ್ಲಿಂದ ವಾಪಸ್ ಬರೋದಿಲ್ಲ, ಬಂದು ಏನಾಯಿತು ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಅಂತ ನಮಗೆ ತಿಳಿಸೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ದಿ ಅನ್ಡಿಸ್ಕವರ್ಡ್ ಕಂಟ್ರಿ ಫ್ರಮ್ ಹೂಸ್ ಬೋರ್ನ್ ನೋ ಟ್ರಾವೆಲರ್ ರಿಟರ್ನ್ಸ್. Our spontaneous resolves are weakened by our intellectual compunctions. Our will is puzzled before the unknowable. That is what we gather from the reading experience of this play. Our spontaneous resolves are weakened by our intellectual compunctions. Our will is puzzled before the unknowable. Having taken this long look, Hamlet will leap into a quick succession of adventures. He will make choices, right or wrong, thick and fast. Particularly in the last act, 5th act, one after another, he takes quick decisions as if he forgot to give due importance to action because he was overwhelmed by feeling and thinking. And now, as if he is reaching his dead end, he takes to action in quick succession. The interrelationship of Hamlet the elder, Claudius, and Gertrude predominates in the mind of Hamlet the younger. All through in the play, we say the younger Hamlet meditating upon the interrelationship between these three: Hamlet, his father, Claudius, and Gertrude. Hamlet begins with a scholar's request to resume his studies at the university, but he ends by being given a soldier's funeral. That is how his story ends. Just as Hamlet has slain Polonius while intending to slay Claudius, so Claudius poisons Gertrude with a drink intended for Hamlet. So this is the play. To conclude, I invoked A.C. Bradley during the course of my talk, who upheld the study of character as the most efficacious approach in understanding the Shakespearean tragedy, but still he qualifies the dictum, character is destiny. Now this particular point is discussed over and over again, whether character is destiny or there is a divinity that shapes our ends. This particular question is kept before the eyes of the intellectuals, and we discuss it no end. Character is destiny, by saying that it may not be entirely true, because many of Shakespeare's personages, if they had not met the peculiar circumstances, would have escaped a tragic end, might even have lived fairly untroubled lives. Take, for example, Hamlet's own life. He would have, in a different circumstances, clement circumstances, probably he would have lived fairly untroubled life. Therefore, if we apply Broadline parameters to Hamlet, the character, we can find many reasons to redeem him and understand his contingency with a fresh light of empathy, so to say. So, this play Hamlet is full of quotations. In fact, when a spectator went to the theatre, invited by his friend, after the play was over, both of them came out, and that friend told the host, "No, this play is full of quotations." That is because Hamlet's the play Hamlet contains a lot of quotations, proverbs. They become part and parcel of our daily life. Now, I must, before I conclude, bring to your kind notice that they say in England, Shakespeare's words, the words spoken by Shakespeare's different characters in different plays, were part and parcel of their daily living. For example, a quotation like, "Brevity is the soul of wit," let us say, which occurs in Hamlet. So that has become almost a proverb, and many people do not know that it is taken from Shakespeare. So it has become almost a part of folklore, so to say. Therefore, some of the latter day critics say that quoting Shakespeare offhand has become a rarity even in England nowadays, in spite of the fact that I think Professor Rangnath would corroborate with me, because the great Professor Ramaswami used to, whenever he went to London, England, he made it a point to watch a Shakespearean play. That was his agenda, so to say. ಭಾಳ ಹೇಳೋರು, ಏನಪ್ಪ ಹೊರಗಡೆ ಹೋದರೆ ಜೋಬಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವಾಗಲೂ ದುಡ್ಡು ನೋಡ್ಕೋಬೇಕಾಗತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ, ಯಾಕೆಂದರೆ ರುಪಿನ ಪೌಂಡ್ ಕನ್ವರ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕಲ್ಲ, ಅಮೆರಿಕಕ್ಕೆ ಹೋದರೆ ಡಾಲರ್ ಕನ್ವರ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಒಂದು ನಾಟಕ ನೋಡಬೇಕಂದ್ರೆ ಟಿಕೆಟ್ಟು ಅದೆಷ್ಟು ಎತ್ತ ಅಂತ, ಆದರೂ ನೋಡೋರು ಅವರು ನೋಡದೆ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇರಲಿಲ್ಲ ರಾಮಸ್ವಾಮಿಗಳು. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ದಿ English people have kept Shakespeare intact. That's the reason why I said very advisedly that Shakespeare is an industry and also an imperishable empire. Britishers came, they conquered us, they ruled over us for 200 years and went away. But Shakespeare lives. That is the reason why I said Shakespeare is part of that imperishable empire. So quoting Shakespeare offhand, I think, is a healthy sign. The reason that people are not nowadays quoting Shakespeare offhand indicates the slow decline of culture. So just as we quote Vachanas or DVG's Mankutimmanakkaga offhand, and the Dasaru's Kirtanigalu, and all that should become part and parcel of our daily living. The more we move away from our roots and culture, it is likely that we forget these sagely quotations, which are an inalienable part of our culture. So that is what I gather from people who visit England, that Shakespeare has become a rarity. That is an unfortunate development. So to wind up my talk, I will bring a couple of quotations from the text, because that is the surest gain that we have when we read such stalwarts as Shakespeare. Some random quotations to jog your memory. So excellent a king that was to this, Hyperion to a satyr, so loving to my mother that he might not between the winds of heaven visit her face too roughly. My father, this is Hamlet in the first act, second scene. Hamlet, the young Hamlet, remembers his father as a godly creature, Hyperion. He was a Greek god compared to the present king. And even he did not allow the winds to be rough, passing on my mother's face. He looked after her so well that, he treated her very, very gently, that he might not between the winds of heaven visit her face too roughly, he says in the first act. So this is in one of the earliest soliloquies in the play. Next one, within a month, ere at the salt of most unrighteous tears had left the flushing in her galled eyes, she married. Within a month she married. O most wicked speed to post with such dexterity to incestuous sheets. Referring to bed sheets, referring to Antapura, so to say. Incestuous sheets, O most wicked speed. Within a month, how can she marry this man? Next one. Beware of entrance to a quarrel, but being in, bear it the opposed may beware of thee. Give every man thy ear, but few thy voice. Take each man's censure, but reserve the judgment. This has almost become part of our daily spoken idiom. Polonius advised to his son Laertes when Laertes is about to leave for the university. So a set of rules and regulations, being a very responsible father, Polonius gives to Laertes. They give thine ear to everybody, but few thy voice, etc., etc. The entire advice, which runs to about 30 or 40 lines, is full of such sagely precepts. Polonius advised to his son. Next one. What a piece of work is man. Professor Rangnath invoked this beautiful passage occurring in the play, Act 2, Scene 1. What a piece of work is man. How noble in reason, how infinite in faculties, in form and moving, how express and admirable. The fact that he used it in my context, I feel really small. I really don't deserve this particular description. Continuing, Shakespeare has said, describing man in action. Admirable in action, how like an angel, in apprehension, how like a god, the beauty of the world, the paragon of animals, and yet to me, ಇದು ಗಮನಿಸಬೇಕಾದ ಹೇಗೆ ಎಂಡ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾನೆ ನೋಡಿ, ಇಷ್ಟೆಲ್ಲ ಅವನು ದೈವಾಂಶ ಸಂಭೂತನಾಗಿದ್ದರೂ ಕೂಡ, and yet to me, what is this quintessence of dust? Man delights not me, no nor woman neither, though by your smiling you seem to say so. This is the quintessence of dust. ಮಣ್ಣಿಂದ ಕಾಯ ಮಣ್ಣಿಂದ ಅಂತ ನಮ್ಮ ಹಿರಿಯರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು ನೋಡಿ. ಅದರಿಂದ ವಾಟ್ ಎ ಪೀಸ್ ಆಫ್ ವರ್ಕ್ ಇಸ್ ಮ್ಯಾನ್, ಹೌ ನೋಬಲ್ ಇನ್ ರೀಸನ್, ಹೌ ಇನ್ಫೈನೈಟ್ ಇನ್ ಫ್ಯಾಕಲ್ಟಿ, ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ನಿಜ. ಆದರೆ ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ನಥಿಂಗ್ ಬಟ್ ದಿ ಕ್ವಿಂಟೆಸೆನ್ಸ್ ಆಫ್ ಡಸ್ಟ್. ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ Shakespeare's philosophy. And to be or not to be, that is the question. Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, ಅದು ಕೂಡ ಗಾದೆ ಮಾತಾಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದೆ ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ. Or to take arms against a sea of troubles, or and by a sleep to save we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. All these expressions have become idioms in the English language. The flesh is heir to, and the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to die, to sleep perchance to dream. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. This is Hamlet to his friend Horatio in the first act and fifth scene. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. The time is out of joint. Another great observation by Shakespeare. The time is out of joint. Oh, cursed spite, that ever I was born to set it right. ನನಗೆ ಈ ಥರದ ಒಂದು ಗುರುತರವಾದ ಜವಾಬ್ದಾರಿ ಬಂತೆ, ನನ್ನ ಕೈಲಿ ಸಾಧ್ಯವೇ ಇದನ್ನು ಸಾಲ್ವ್ ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ, ಎಂಥ ಎನಾರ್ಮಸ್ ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ನ ನಾನು ಫೇಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ ಅನ್ನುವ ಒಂದು ಮಾತು. ದ ಟೈಮ್ ಈಸ್ ಔಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಜಾಯಿಂಟ್. ಓ ಕರ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಸ್ಪೈಟ್ that ever I was born to set it right. His father's death and our over hasty marriage, that is what bothering the young Hamlet. The queen, his mother, tells the king, the new king, that is Claudius, his father's death and our over hasty marriage. Brevity is the soul of wit, Polonius in his speech to the king. Though this be madness, yet there is method in it. ಇದನ್ನು ನಾವು ಇವತ್ತು ಬಳಸ್ತೀವಿ. ದೆರ್ ಇಸ್ ಎ ಮೆಥಡ್ ಇನ್ ಮ್ಯಾಡ್ನೆಸ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. ಅದು ಹ್ಯಾಮ್ಲೆಟಲ್ಲಿ ಬರೋಂಥ ಮಾತು. ದೆರ್ ಇಸ್ ನಥಿಂಗ್ ಐದರ್ ಗುಡ್ ಆರ್ ಬ್ಯಾಡ್, ಬಟ್ ಥಿಂಕಿಂಗ್ ಮೇಕ್ಸ್ ಇಟ್ ಸೋ. ಆಯಿತು, ಇಷ್ಟು ನಾಟಕದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡೋದು. ಎಷ್ಟು ಮಾತಾಡಿದ್ರು ಮುಗಿಯಲ್ಲ. ನಾನು ಹೇಳಿದೆ, ದಿ ಅಮೌಂಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಕ್ರಿಟಿಸಿಸಮ್ ದ್ಯಾಟ್ ಹ್ಯಾಸ್ ಕಮ್ ಇನ್ ದಿಸ್ ವರ್ಲ್ಡ್ ಅಬೌಟ್ Shakespearean plays is enormous, especially on Hamlet, is inexhaustible. That's why it is Shakespeare's industry, Shakespearean industry, so to say. Therefore, with the limited time that is allotted to me, I do not know to what extent I delivered the goods, and I promised to the heavenly spirit of Professor Ramaswami that I will not do disservice to your memory at the beginning of my speech. I hope I have won your hearts and approval that you have not let down Professor Ramaswami. I thank Dr. Rangnath for giving me this opportunity to pay my humble tributes to the memory of his most erudite father, Professor Ramaswami. My thanks are also due to the office bearers of this great organization, Gokhale Institute of Public Affairs, particularly the Honorary Secretary, Mr. Nagaraj, and Mr. Ramu. I thank you all for your patient hearing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your wonderful exposition of Hamlet in the background of Shakespeare. In a short span of 75 minutes, you have done more than justice to the subject. And whenever you were quoting, especially the last part, brevity, the soul of wit, and though this be madness, yet there is method in it, and to be or not to be, that's the question. I felt as though my father was talking that to me in my house. Those three were the most interesting and illuminating statements which quite often my father used to quote. There is another point of similarity between my father and Professor Naganna, which I have to disclose now. Both of them, they write in black ink and their handwriting is almost similar. Therefore, I always consider Professor Naganna as my elder brother. And it is so affectionate on his part to have come all the way from Mysore to deliver this particular talk. And especially I am grateful to him for the amount of preparation he has made for this particular lecture in spite of his very busy schedule. As he himself said in the beginning that what a busy person he was in last 2 months, and especially his commitments with Delhi and other academic bodies. In spite of that, he has made this particular venture very possible. And as a very true, conscientious and an effective teacher, he has brought out beautifully in the form of the structure of Shakespeare into our minds. He started with giving the brief background to the family circumstances of Shakespeare. Then he analyzed chronologically the historical way in which Shakespeare wrote those plays. There was historical perspective. And then he came to the Hamlet, and like an ideal classroom teacher with lot of experience, he gave us the substance of the play. Then he concentrated on the characters of the play, and finally he ended with Subhashita like quotable quotes from Hamlet. And thus it was a very well structured, well ordered, well organized and well delivered lecture by Professor C. Naganna, for which I, on behalf of you and all the office bearers of Gokhale Institute of Public Affairs, extend him a very, very cordial, loyal and heartfelt thanks for his wonderful lecture, sir. Thank you very much. And I also thank all the audience who are here. And from the point of view of the Shakespeare, how exactly he started, like that he ended, from the point of view of the Shakespeare plays. And there was perfect symmetry between Upakrama and Upasamhara, as the Shastric injunction goes. As you commence, so should end. My past is in my future is in my past, and past and future are both present in time present, as Eliot may say. So that was very well executed, very efficiently, very indigenously by Professor C. Naganna. We are grateful to him. Thank you very much, sir.